Hello, and welcome back again to the Meld PR vlog. I am Jonathon Narvey. I'm the founder of Meld PR, an agency that works with tech companies to get the media coverage. And once again, I'm here with our agency's senior writer, Lyle Neff. Say hi.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Excellent. And I'm looking forward to our next topic. What do reporters want anyway? What do reporters want? That's the big question. Your pitch cannot be successful unless you answer the basic questions that they need to know. And it's really simple. There's a formula for this. There's a recipe. It's called the 5 W's and an H. Lyle, take it away.
Okay, you got your where, you got your what, you got your who, you got your when, and you got your why. Now, the why is the tricky one, as is the H, because why and how are trickier questions to answer. But at the very bare minimum, the first 4 W's are something you need to focus on, starting with what. What does it make a news story, Narvey? What is it that a reporter would want to know about what?
Well, what could be just about anything. It could be a product launch, a service launch, but to make it news, it can't look very much like the last thing you had. The operating principle is new is news. So what is the new cool thing? Do you have an AI powered drone, chatbot, nuclear reactor? AI is pretty hot these days, so that could be a what. It doesn't have to just be a product launch or a service launch. It could be oh geez, I've lost the thread. Take it away, Lyle. What else is a what?
What can obviously be things that are in their essence new, and a product launch, for example, is of course new because it's news. Yet at the same time, of course, there are thousands of launches products every day, and not all of them can make the headlines. So you and I, Narvey, of course, were once practitioners of the ink-stained trade ourselves. And if you remember from your reporter days, when news was presented to you or you were chasing after a story, the what was always, I was always looking for something that made me curious, that I wanted to know more about. And so now that we're PR people and we're thinking about what reporters might want, and we're considering like what is the first W, what actually makes it news.
All right, that was a long and drawn out, excellent way for you to buy some time for me to come up with some other examples.
Back to you, Narvey.
So your company just got funding of $1 million or 5 million or 10 million, and now you've got all kinds of things you can do. Well, your target audience is going to want to know about that. So funding. Could be a major change in the direction of your company. So your company has adopted a new strategy that is not just for internal use. You're not just, well, actually, it could be for internal use. Let's say your company decides to focus on diversity and inclusion, which has been done kind of to death. But let's say you've got a new angle on it. So unlike every other tech company out there, you've actually managed to achieve full parity of half your developers are men and 49% are women and 1% are something interesting. And then what else could be a what? I mean, I don't want this all to be what, but the what has to be, as I think I alluded to before, it has to be new. What's the new in the news?
I would just add before we cruise on to the rest of this fleet of W's here, the what of it, the news, can also be something that happens to you. I would point out that Zoom is a company that's been much in the news lately. Not for anything particular that they did. History and time just kind of caught up to them, and now you can't avoid it. And I imagine that Zoom has some PR professionals working on their messaging. I imagine those people are pretty busy, probably pulling their hair out right now. Because, again, what can be something that happens to you? And if there's a news story, good or bad, that strongly involves your company, PR professionals have to come in and kind of make sure that message gets out the way you want it to,
Yeah.
despite the unpredictability of events.
Full disclosure, we use Zoom. We love it. It's working.
We're on Zoom.
Fantastic. Thanks, Zoom. I think one final point I wanted to touch on for the what. Let's say you're in a position where actually you don't have a new product or service coming out. You're kind of doing the same old, which is probably a problem for you, but whatever. You don't actually have some new news to report. You just stay quiet. One thing you can do is latch on to news that's happening elsewhere that is controversial and offer an opinion or a listicle of 5 things that tie into the thing that everyone's talking about. So I'll give you a simple example. I used to work with a fintech company that was involved with investing. And so every season is RRSP season, which might not mean anything to our American audience, but for Canadians, RRSPs are a savings vehicle where you can invest and you get a tax benefit, and you have a deadline every year that you have to put your money into your RRSP by. There's actually 2 deadlines. There's end of the year, and then I think it's end of March.
Come to the point now, Narvey.
Okay. Well, this company, we knew this event was happening. It happens every year. So we had 5 tips for how to make the most or save the most in your RRSP. And that got a ton of coverage. So just if you know something's going to be happening, whether it's an every year thing, a perennial thing, or it's in the news, you can tie into things if you have expert advice to offer. So we've covered the what. Do you want to talk about when, timing?
Yeah, we were just talking about this recently in terms of there's a word we use which I think is kind of a made up word, and it's recency. As you know, we'll be working on a document or a campaign or something, and you'll say to me or me to you, well, where's the new hook in this? Where's the recency? Like, how long ago did this happen? Now, it's true that for current events, as you're speeding along through time, you can latch on to whatever happens to be passing by you. But you can't latch on after a certain amount of time has passed. And in some media contexts, that period of time is 24 hours. In some other contexts, it might be 2 months. For example, if we were doing a thought leadership piece with a client or something, and we wanted to put in a few hyperlinks to kind of back up and illustrate the client's points, our general policy is not to include any hyperlink beyond maybe 2 months if we push it. Isn't that correct for thought leadership?
Well, I mean, generally the newer the better. But I'm thinking more in terms of proactive PR, not necessarily thought leadership. Like, let's say you're putting out a press release about something, and you really do have to tie it into what's new, not just this month, but ideally this week. So, for example, we were putting out a pitch about hiring tech talent from around the world for a large tech recruiter that is doing big business thanks to Canada's global talent stream. They have jumped right on that. And so the issue there was the global talent stream has actually been around for about 1.5 years, 2 years. So the challenge there was what makes this new? And it wasn't, I'm trying to remember. I think it was actually a new service tied to this, and there was also
another news article that mentioned in depth this otherwise fairly obscure and ongoing into the past government program.
Well,
we did a hook there, but the launch, for example, of the Global Talent Stream government program was not our hook. We found something, and I can't specifically remember what it was.
Well, sorry, Lyle. Now I do think I remember. I think it was that the company hit a metric, and it was something like 750 tech professionals from abroad hired So that's a big round number.
It's both a when and a what, I mean, it's like, okay,
mm,
first off, we're celebrating a little
mm,
milestone here. And it's also the news that we're bringing in all these people. The specific part that makes it a when is, well, just past last Tuesday, we hired the 750th
yeah.
or the 1000th or anything like that. Milestones are a very useful when type of hook.
Mm,
This goes back to the what as well, because other whens are holidays. There's always holidays coming up. You can peg certain pitches and ideas to.
mm,
There's pop culture. If the really big blockbuster movies are opening across the summer and everybody's talking about them, you can usually find a way to kind of get a mention of your client in there somewhere.
mm, mm.
Angle it the right way as far as when goes. But it has to be
Yeah,
recent.
yeah. I was just thinking of, I remember there was an even more timely hook to that story beyond the company's milestone. This was tying it into some new research that showed Canada needed to hire something like, um, I think it was, I think it was something like 230,000 tech professionals within the next 5 years who just would not be produced by our own universities and schools. Like we literally don't have enough boots on the ground of people coming out of Red Academy or UBC or whatever it is, wherever they're training developers. And at the time, a third hook. So the final example of timeliness for this particular story. The USA had recently clamped down on visas for tech professionals to come into the US. They made it very, very hard for companies in Amazon and like Amazon, Microsoft, those kinds of things to those kinds of companies to hire and just bring them directly to Silicon Valley. So you were seeing a surge of American tech companies moving up to Vancouver and Toronto and even places like Saskatoon and Edmonton. And so they would set up these remote teams to take advantage of the global talent stream. And I mean that take advantage in the nicest sense of the word, not to exploit our system, but to make sure that they could grow and use the best talent out there. And to do that, they had to come through Canada and more specifically through the company we represented.
Right. So, I mean, when you're talking about when in terms of timeliness and what a reporter needs, there has to be very recent. There's also a little way you can angle into the future. If something is looming, like this looming skills shortage. Well, when is that? It's kind of constantly ongoing. But if you tie it to a number like, well, we need 200,000 positions filled in 5 years, then that makes it, once again, both a when and a what. Pretty cool.
What's our next W we want to cover? Is it the
we
why?
can get into why. We can get into why. And remember, this is all about what reporters want. And what reporters want to know about why is, it's not even really like, why is this important or why is this newsworthy? It's a much more elemental question, which is, why should anybody give a damn? You're always battling apathy in this trade, are you not, Jonathon?
You are indeed. So, yeah, I think there's a why. Well, I mean that's a fundamental question. Why is this important? Why is this a story? But there's also a more specific why to every story. So, for example,
why did this happen,
right? Yeah. Well, let's say a company is announcing a change in strategy. So, something very straightforward would be a company that's doing digital transformation to change over from physical delivery of services to online services. And why are they doing it now? Because of COVID, because no one can go to stores. So they have to make that change. So that would be a very straightforward one. But there's plenty of reasons that a company could change strategy. If you're talking about a service or a product launch, the question of why is why is this important is answered by, where is the hunger in the market for this particular thing? So
What problem does this service or product attempt to solve, right? We're always talking about problems and solutions. And interestingly, I think that reporters are too, at least the more seasoned variety, because they'll look at, they've seen 1,000 or 10,000 news stories, and they're coming in with they've got their W5+H, and they're also looking at it going, well, I've seen how these things are structured. So there are two kinds of why. Why should anybody care? And why did such and such a thing happen? And generally, in our context, we can generally answer pretty quickly. Why did they launch a new product? Well, they just love to sell products, man. They're a business,
Well, okay, that's one take, but companies don't just aren't formed just to make money. They're there to solve a problem. So that's actually, we want to make sure anytime we're talking about a service or a product launch that we're talking about the why, not from the perspective of, X company wants to make $50 million in the next quarter. Those stories do appear. Like you'll see iPhone comes out with a new version, and Apple is talking about, they're looking forward to earning such and such profit level over the next couple quarters. But that's actually, to me, that's the least interesting aspect of the story. It's more, why is...
Do we not, I mean, obviously companies want to make money. It's not even worth saying, really.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to shareholders if we're talking about public companies.
Sure.
But for most stories, the why is more focused on the consumer of, if we're talking about a product or service launch, why is this even in the market? Why does this exist?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into where. That's an important question. So very often when you're putting out a press release, your story, you're going to target media that are going to find it relevant. And if you only offer your service or product in a particular, in one city, then you're probably just going to focus on regional coverage. Now there could be exceptions to that if you have a seriously leading edge technology or something that's never been seen before. And let's say, so you're doing a soft launch in 1 or 2 or 3 cities just to test out the market to see if there's product market fit. And if that, again, if it's, something very, very cool in clean tech or fintech or machine learning, big data, smart cities, some of the really trendy leading edge technologies people care about today, maybe that could be a national or even international story. But really the, where something is happening really affects whether you're going to bother targeting journalists abroad.
Well, yeah, and that goes to the structure of the media as well. When we're pitching and putting out outreach and so forth, we always have to be cognizant, not just, of course, like where an outlet actually is, but what they're designated to cover. I think, like obviously, inevitably, our closest relationships to the people we actually know are people in Vancouver. So a lot of our work starts with the local press, but because we actually have content or clients all across the continent, we have to think too, now, let's say we had a company that was coming out of the Waterloo corridor, and they had a really hot product, which we think we can get national or even international play. But it would be remiss of us not to also look at the Waterloo papers, Waterloo media, Waterloo TV and radio stations. The bias towards localism is strong, and I don't know how you can really break this down, but I would suspect that most media is, in fact, local. National newspapers are a pretty rare breed.
Well, yeah, and there's a really practical reason for that bias is that a lot of public relations people or media relations people or just internal marketers who send out press releases, if they have relationships with journalists, it's probably with local people.
Yeah.
So that just it gives them that much of a greater chance to get
A key
published
element
locally.
of where is like, for the PR practitioner is you're going to be able to have lunch with, you can't have lunch with somebody in Dallas, San Antonio. You can get a lot done for them. You do just as good a job, but the kind of relationships and connections that we have to cultivate always start at home. Of course, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I would make a note on that relationship building that, just from, what, I don't know how other PR agencies operate, but I often say that relationship building is something, when you're building a relationship with a journalist, it isn't a guarantee of coverage, even if you know the person, you live on the same street. This gives you an extra 5 seconds when you pitch them. They might, if they recognize your email handle, they might actually look at your subject line for an extra couple seconds. They might give you a couple extra seconds of reading time into your second or third paragraph, but you really have to bring the value there. So relationships, whether they're local or abroad, they only go so far. It's a bit of a tangent, but so I think I wanted to give an example of, where comes into it. So we had a client. We were offering, we were trying to get coverage for a bleeding edge medical technology, and the service was actually only available low in the region. In fact, in this person's clinic. So a lot of our outreach was local, but that said, we were also able to come up with angles for international American health magazines. So those focused on, say, mental health, brain health, that kind of thing, which, these were big publications and big magazines and even radio and TV stations. So really many stories will have, you can pitch different journalists in different places, but when you do so, you can't just send the exact same press release to people, in, let's say, New York, as Vancouver, as San Francisco, as New Orleans. You might need to add a little bit of local flavor.
Well, yeah, because when you're reaching out to journalists and outlets in other parts of the continent or around the world, for that matter, you obviously don't have any knowledge of local conditions there, and that's where research can really help you out. Just in terms of I'm talking about researching like what the media situation is. If I've got a reporter who works for an online tech publication, and I see that they're actually headquartered in an unusual locale for techs, for a tech company, like say Louisiana, then it's definitely worth a few minutes of my time to just sort of check things out and go, I wonder if the local paper in Baton Rouge ever covers this sort of thing, or stuff like that. The company, the client may not be thinking about the local press because they want to sell across the continent or across the world, but we're interested in getting media coverage where it might be easiest, and that often starts with the hometown of the client.
Mm-hmm. So I think, have we covered all the W's? We covered why, we covered when.
We have a very important one, who. And let's not forget, we are trying to tie this to what reporters are wanting. Now, when we say that the reporters want W5, that's just because what you're taught in J school is the essence of a good story. So what reporters want is pretty much what we want in the end. This is a sidebar. We'll get onto the who in a moment. But what we all want is a nicely written story that is useful and informative to readers, that makes our clients happy, that makes us happy, that makes the reporter proud, because the reporter doesn't feel that, they've been misled or jerked around or pushed into writing about something they didn't want to write about. But be that as it may, we need to talk about the who, the persons actually involved in a story that we are looking to place.
Right. So the journalists are looking for an expert source, someone who, by virtue of their job title alone, looks like they would know a thing or two about the topic at hand. So often, the main expert source that we are providing to journalists is a CEO or a CTO level, certainly a leadership level. Occasionally, there will be other members of the team who will come up, but it generally, at least for the kind of PR that we do, the kind of media relations for tech that we do, it's mainly that level, that C-suite, that's looking to burnish their credentials a little bit and make their expertise known. And so you help out the journalists by helping them understand, okay, well, you may include the job title. You would not go to the extent usually of listing off all their credentials academically. That I've seen that on occasion.
Do a different distinction, right? When we're talking about who, and reporters want to write about persons of significance, there's probably two ways we could break it down. There are people who are interesting in and of themselves because they're experts, because they have a commentary to provide. They have something unusual to say about something that a reporter is writing about. And then there's another who category we could say, which is persons of significance, celebrities, political leaders, very famous business leaders of the type that we don't often deal with ourselves. Other types of agencies deal with other persons like that. But again, this goes back to what the reporter wants and who do they want to talk about or to or with. Either people who really know what they're talking about or people who are already well known one way or the other.
One thing
part of what we do is trying to make people well known. So.
For the most part, there are occasions. I'm not going to say it's very rare, but it certainly it does come up where leaders want to shy away from the camera a little bit, and they want to put their company first, and not really. My company isn't about me. I'm just I'm a member of the team, just like everybody else, and by putting
very noble attitude, buddy. Very noble attitude.
Yeah. So by putting my my quote into a press release, I'm just gonna be calling attention to myself, and I'm not a vain guy. Okay, well that's dumb. That's like don't do that. Because if you're covering
when you have to take a client who doesn't have a lot of ego and kind of install an ego into him or her, you know, because you have to say in the circumstance where you're talking about, look, I understand that you run a very flat organization that is incredibly democratic and it's probably very inclusive. I don't doubt, but in order to get anything to the paper, generally speaking, there's got to be a face attached. Someone's going to have to be the face.
And again, we're not talking about images here. We're talking quotes. Just like in the genre of photography, you'll find that the photographs that get the most reaction have people in them, people's faces. You'll find that press releases that get the most action have multiple quotes by expert sources who seem to be interesting and know a thing or two and are saying something original, maybe edgy, contentious, providing news you can use, something actionable. So I think that pretty much covers, you know, what we like to see in a proactive PR campaign. Lyle, any final thoughts?
Well, just that the care and feeding of journalists involves necessarily figuring out what they want. And as we mentioned, all too briefly, because I could tell war stories all day long about the journalistic days, reporters very quickly want to have a good story in the end. They want to have a byline they can be proud of. And if you're a PR person who can get them the information, the people, recently enough about something that is significant, with people who have interesting things to say about it, then you're making that journalist happy. I understand what journalists want. Reporters want a story. It's got to be a real story, and it's got to have some flavor to it.
Well, I think that just about covers it. So, Lyle, Neff, it has been once again a pleasure talking to you on the Meld PR vlog, and we have been talking about what do reporters want anyway. Now you know.
All right. We'll see you later, everybody. Thanks, John.
All right. Cheers.